Mrs. Blot, thank you very much for your time. And the first question is, what's the main challenge for American education today?
I think for us in the United States, the biggest challenge and one that's continuing to evolve is that of the learner expectations, the expectations that students have today and are more likely to grow over time as consumers of education. People are looking for education to be more dynamic and more personalized, to have an experience that's not a cookie cutter experience, but that is something that is very personal to them in their learning path and their competencies. And that for us is a big switch in our education system, which for a long time has been very factory-like of doing the same thing, based on grade level. So that's what we spend a lot of time talking about, is how do we evolve the education system, and how does the use of technology and other tools we have today allow us to evolve that education system to one that allows for a unique experience by learner, and therefore will help us get better to the learning outcomes that we need for each individual.
What do the students expect?
So students expect me to be able to interact with their education all the time, not just while they're in the four walls of a classroom. They want to be able to extend that education. They want to be able to do self-discovery, to use tools and the internet to gain additional knowledge, and they want to bring that in to their education experience. So again, for us, where we've had a fairly locked down, set curriculum, and learning happens in a classroom or in a lecture room, and it's mostly knowledge given to students by an expert, as opposed to always being highly interactive, and one where students bring learnings from other places into that ecosystem. We see that that's what they're expecting. They're expecting to bring things that they learned from peers or from social networking with people in different countries across the globe, and they want to bring that in and make that part of their education dynamic. And they want to have mobile access to all of their education. They want real-time feedback. They don't want to wait, and neither do parents. They don't want to wait for 2 or 3 days to hear how things went. They want to know right away where they are and how they're doing. So those to me are the biggest changes in learner expectations, is how and when and where they consume the education, how broad the education landscape is to them, and how many people it involves. It involves a lot, again, beyond their individual teacher and the people in their classroom, but starts to involve a lot more people.
They want a lot of things.
They want a lot of things, absolutely, and they should.
Is it possible to give the self-learning and self-discovery even for students in public schools?
I think absolutely. It's one of, to me, the most powerful things that technology can do for us, is it can take some of these things that we believe work well in education. We've seen different experiments happen with creative classrooms and School of One, where we've changed maybe the instructor student dynamic and made it such that we could do personalized and individualized instruction, and for the most part get very good results. Technology to me allows us to do those types of things at scale. It allows us to do them with not just one but maybe 40 students at the same time. So I think it is possible, and so that should be very accessible to public schools as well as private schools, especially as it becomes more prevalent and more people are providing tools like this. The prices should go down and it should become more accessible to everyone.
Does the technology exert an influence? Is the technology an important actor in this scenario?
I think technology is a very important actor, and not because it's technology. I'm a big believer that technology is only an enabler, but because it can be this powerful tool to help us first learn more about what people are learning. So I always think about a paper-based assessment, and there are certain things we can know about a learner when they take a quiz, even informal assessment. We know, did they know the answer to this question? If they take that same assessment via technology, we can know so much more. We can start to assess their level of confidence. How long did it take them to answer? Did they answer 2 different ways and then before they landed on the final answer? So I think technology gives us a much more rich data set about where the learner is and how they are absorbing or developing certain competencies. And then equally as important, it allows us to not just have a one-size-fits-all, for instance, in a classroom, here's the content I'm going to teach today. It allows us, even inside that same classroom, if we're using technology, we can assess where different learners are and tee up different content and different assessment types to them based on their level of competency. And we can do it then without separating students and saying, here's the smart class and here's the not smart class. We can do it in a way that keeps everyone in that same physical environment and interacting as a cohort. At the same time, we can treat them differently with regards to the different education modules and learning modules that we're teeing up for them. So yes, I think technology can be very powerful because it just allows us to do those things it's impossible for one teacher or one faculty member to do with a large number of students.
And what technologies are available today? What kinds of technologies are you talking about?
So a lot of technologies today, to me what's most exciting is we're seeing more and more all the time. So there are certainly just the broad-based technologies. So we have learning or management platforms, so places where there are tools to help learning and where education content can be shared, where assessments can be taken and grades, monitored or captured. We also have a lot of tools that are being developed, very discipline specific, so less holistic about managing a whole course and a whole cohort of students, but very specific to teaching a particular concept. And so to me what's fascinating is those micro tools, if you will, so these things that are fairly specialized, where we're seeing a lot of movement in the market. So I think we're headed to this space, and really probably we're already there, where these macro tools can provide and be a great platform in which all of these other things, as they innovate and evolve, can be plugged in to create an experience that's both deep, but also allows for all of the interesting things to be tracked about a classroom. There's certainly a lot of collaboration tools, so tools that allow for even face-to-face interaction if you're not physically located together. Those to me are probably the biggest ones. And then of course we're seeing mobile extensions on everything. So for almost every tool that's created, there's a mobile extension that allows it to be interacted with on a device, a phone or a tablet.
You have been a CIO for Federal Student Aid at the U.S. Department of Education. And what's the mission of that department? We don't know. And what were your goals there?
Yep. So the U.S. Department of Education is basically the Ministry of Education in the United States. So I was the CIO of the higher education arm, which was federal student aid. So our mission was to put America through school. So our mission was to deliver federal dollars, what we call Title IV dollars, but federal financial aid basically to students across the country so that everyone can afford a higher education degree if that's what they seek to pursue. So my goals there, certainly from an IT leadership standpoint, was to revamp our enterprise infrastructure. I was CIO there at the time where we were seeing amazing leaps and bounds in core technology around business applications and enterprise data. And so my goal there, and what I spent a lot of time with, was really re-engineering the underlying architecture so that we could have applications and tools that were more nimble as student needs emerged and started to emerge more quickly, that we would be able to adapt our systems more quickly based on those student needs. So what we did was we moved, $80 million a year in financial aid out to U.S. citizens to allow them to afford higher education.
And what part of education, of American education, do you think demands more attention today? For the university, what part of education?
Right. So I'll answer very personally. I'm very passionate about education. It's what I've done for almost my whole career. I think it all starts at the beginning, and I think if you don't get early childhood education right in the early years of education, you're not setting the foundation. So I think the whole education life cycle is very, very important. For me in America, we're struggling more in what we call the K-12 space, in the pre-higher education, pre-post-secondary. So I think that's what deserves the most attention in America today, that we really need to start to evolve how we're delivering that side of our education space, although higher education needs attention as well.
And could you see any resemblance between Brazil and the United States?
Yes, it was fascinating to me actually preparing to come down here. I started looking at a lot of the trends that were happening in Brazilian education and the movement towards private universities and the student construct within the private universities and how many students are what we call non-traditional learners. They're working adults. They're people that appear to be coming back to getting reskilled to reposition themselves in the workforce. And that's something that we're seeing not just in the United States, but across the globe, this global demand for education in order to prepare people for the jobs of today and jobs as they evolve. So yeah, I was definitely struck by the makeup of the student population, the increase in the use of technology in education, and the great increase in the number of people who are both consuming education but opting for fully online education. In Brazil, actually probably growing that particular segment of education as fast as any other country that I've seen. So a lot of parallels.
And how is the teachers graduation in US? Because here we fight against a serious problem because according to the law, all teachers for children's education should have a graduation degree at least. But in fact, it doesn't happen. In the US, is there any obligation, minimum obligation?
So the minimum obligation is a teaching certificate. So we have teaching programs that basically certify people to be teachers, and I should preface that that's for our public school system. So we have a minimum credentialing that's required, and it requires not just initial credentialing, but ongoing training and development. In the private schools, it varies, so less regulated there and less rules, and so it's not, though, normally until we enter the upper grades, and then certainly in higher education where there's normally a graduate degree required. Now that said, any given school district may have different requirements, but we do have broad-based, and then it's by state teacher certification. So teachers need to be certified in different states in which they can teach, and then they also, for most states, have to have so much time in a classroom. So they have to be an assistant teacher and have to have both the certificate and the education behind that, but they also then have to have like a practicum where they've actually practiced teaching in a real live environment before they're certified to teach on their own.
Is there a gap between the public schools and the private schools in the US? Because here in Brazil we have a big gap between both of them.
From what I have heard of Brazil, we have gaps in different ways. So there are certainly places where our gap is very, very big between public and private. There are gaps that are smaller. There are places where the public school systems are some of the top systems in an area, and actually, better than depending on how you measure the private schools in the area. Unfortunately for us, it's just really driven by the economic variables. So our public education system is funded primarily through real estate taxes, and so the more wealthy a given area is, usually the more money is going into a school, and this is something that is a big focus in the United States today, is how do we get equal access to high quality education across our entire public school systems and not just in pockets. So unfortunately what you'll see in some areas that are low income areas, the public school systems, again, that gap between the public and private being very, very large. And then in more affluent areas, the gap may be smaller to non-existent. And then I would just say within the private institutions as well, we have huge gaps there and huge gaps in pricing as well. I mean, in the United States, private school can be anything from a couple thousand US dollars, usually for parochial religious schools, to, in the area that I live, can be $30,000 a year for kindergarten and private education. So those become widely different experiences that you get.
Talking about Blackboard, what are the models of partnerships with the schools, between the schools and Blackboard?
Yeah, so for Blackboard, we provide technology as well as services in the education space, in early childhood all the way to lifelong learning and corporate partners. So we partner with institutions primarily by providing them then the technology that helps them meet their education missions. We also partner with many institutions in helping them use that technology most effectively, but also in looking beyond the technology, and we partner with institutions on pedagogical approaches, on on thinking about their strategy for going online. We do that with institutions even if they don't use any Blackboard technology. And so our partnerships really vary, but I would say that most of them are grounded in this foundation of people who are interested in are using Blackboard technology. And again, it's for childhood and the school systems, higher education, and then we also partner with companies and government agencies as they look to do employee training and provide
municipalities
lifelong.
also, with municipalities.
Absolutely, with the municipalities. So.
And does Blackboard participate when the planning was going on, the annual planning, for example?
Oh, for an institution itself?
Yes.
Sometimes. So those to me are our best partnerships, where we have many institutions where we meet with maybe 2 or 3 times a year, and one time when they're doing their big planning, and then also check in with them and we share with them, here's where we're going as a company and our plans, but more importantly, we hear what they're looking to do. That shapes for us not just how we can be a good partner to that particular institution, but it allows us insight into what's happening in the education environment more broadly and what are the things we should be thinking of as a company. You know, we start to see trends in different institutions. When we start to see the same thing emerge in, 20 different institutions' strategic plan, it starts to help us think about our strategic plan and what products and services we should be providing into education.
Nowadays, there are many enterprises that give consulting and sales to schools, private or public schools, system learning, and some critics here in Brazil say that most models are closed, already closed, and they don't allow to think about the individual characteristics of the schools. What do you think about it?
Yeah, what I would say is I think that's one of the biggest challenges, and not unique to Brazil, challenge we have. And I travel a lot and talk to different, especially heads of education in different countries. I think we're entering this period where change is not just coming, change is going to be ever present in education. And this again is an institution not used to changing, not a given institution, but education itself. I think we have to rock the foundation of that. I think we can't think of things as closed anymore, that things have to continue to evolve, and we need to get ourselves to a state at an individual institution level that we're open to change and willing to change, because again, this is what students are going to expect, but it's also what's going to be necessary to start to educate what's going to be a growing and different population, right? We've set up a lot of these institutions, certainly in the United States, but in many places, for a fairly similar group of people to come in for a fairly similar outcome, which was readiness for jobs that were existing 20 years ago. and it really needs to change. So again, I think not uncommon, not that it's going to be easy to do, but hopefully as things start to evolve, we'll get out of this place of closed and set in ways.
By using Univesp Foundation, that is our TV here in São Paulo State, the government of São Paulo wants to offer graduation courses, distance learning, in fact. Do you think that it's possible to offer something like that even for sensible areas like medicine, like engineering courses, graduation courses, distance courses?
With online, absolutely, and I say it because we know that people are doing it, and people are doing it very well. I'll say that other people are doing it not very well, so I think there's benefit and challenges to online. Online, to me, can be a very powerful tool. There aren't many disciplines that it can't work for, especially as technology evolves and you can do lab work, via technology. I think the challenge is you really need to be focused on doing it right. You can also probably do a lot of harm with technology if you're not very thoughtful around the experience that you're providing. It's very easy to get into, I'm just going to throw up some content and students have to fend for themselves. And again, for a certain motivated type of learner, that can work. But for the average folks, it can, and certainly for advanced degrees, becomes more and more difficult, where access to that expert and having a highly facilitated environment where it's not just knowledge intake. Going out and reading content is enough. You need to be involved in group dialogue about it. You need to have questions posed and exercises, and you need to have experiential learning. That to me can be highly enabled with technology and done online, but it needs to be done in a very thoughtful way.
You said on your speech that the increasing of the use of MOOCs. And can you tell us an interesting experience with using of MOOCs?
Oh, some interesting how people are experimenting with MOOCs?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. To me, it's probably personally one of the most interesting thing to me about MOOCs is the experimentation itself. So yeah, we are seeing people start to, and it's small numbers right now, but start to look at the use, just what you're saying, the use of tools in making them broadly available to start to figure out, are there certain learner types that can learn from certain technology usage. So we're starting to see people do creative uses of some of the social learning tools, certainly the people who are using our platform for MOOCs, and then starting to track the results of what is happening with, for instance, students who use these social learning tools more often than others in a class. Are they getting better learning outcomes or not, so that they can start to assess, are these tools that we should take back and start to promote the usage of more highly in our regular courses. So those to me are exciting things. So that's the primary area I'm seeing, is people starting to experiment less with a whole different pedagogical approach, but experimenting more with the use of different technology and tools in the learning experience, and mostly those that relate to groups of students, because again, what the MOOC does is provides this powerful environment where you have so many people from so many different experience bases coming together, and so seeing what you can do with groups and teams of people, and how if higher interaction in that type of activity advances the learning outcomes is what we're seeing. So I'm excited. Hopefully a couple of years from now we'll start seeing some actual research emerge and some data around what people are finding.
Mrs. Blot, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure. It was wonderful to meet you.
Thank you very much.